Hello, my friends. Welcome to the Life Shift podcast. I am here with Jackie. Hello, Jackie.
Hey, Matt.
This is very weird, everyone listening now. I know Jackie. Jackie and I have known each other now 15 years, maybe, something like that.
Probably. So yeah, full disclosure, we'll put it right out there.
And so what's weird about that? It's not weird in a sense that I know you for that long. It's weird for listeners because I haven't talked to someone about their personal story on this podcast that I know since I think maybe the first 10, 15 episodes of the show. And this is episode 168.
Wow.
So there's been a big gap. So thank you for bridging that gap.
You're welcome. I think I was just way too scared in the beginning. I remember we had mutual friends that were on the podcast and I listened to all of them and I was like, wow, I can't believe they're just going out there and saying all of this stuff. So it just took me a couple years to come around.
Hey, I think that's okay. I think we're all on our own timetable. And I think what I've learned over the last 3 full years almost of doing this show is that everyone's story has value, both to the storyteller by telling that story and letting it out, but also there's so many people that we probably will never interact with that are hearing our stories and like going, oh, I'm not alone, or oh, I'm not weird for thinking that. However long it took you, I'm glad you're here because I think your story is important. And before we were recording, I was like, as odd as some of the moments that you might feel are in your story, there are probably other people out there that have experienced something very similar.
I'm sure. I'm sure
Yeah.
that's true. And this is coincidental, but it's 10 years since my moment that I picked to share. And so it's crazy that you were there when that was happening for me too. So, I mean, you heard about it in some respect when it was actually happening.
And you know what? I think too, we worked together for so
Hmm.
long. And I think we naturally, our generation, because we're the same age, we
You're
we
1 month
show
older.
well, that's true. We show up to work. I think we show up to work differently though. We were taught to kind of come into work, we leave this other stuff behind. We don't share all of the things. So I probably know part of your story. I don't know that I necessarily know all the ins and outs of it because we weren't really brought up that way. We weren't really taught to share as much. And I'm glad that we are, like as a generation, like we're starting to learn that as we get older. But,
Hmm.
I think, yeah, I probably know your story, but I don't know if I know your story.
Well, I felt the same way about you because I listened to your episode telling your story too. And it was like I knew it, but I didn't know it in that level of depth and feeling behind all of it, you know?
Right.
So I feel like I've gotten to know you better just by listening to your podcast.
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you for listening. It's really been quite a journey, and thank you for being along the ride for the whole part of it. It's been really fun. So let's get into your story. Before you do
Okay.
that, though, maybe you can tell us who Jackie is in 2025. We're starting out the new year. Who are you?
I'm a mom. I have 2 kids. They are 11 and 13, both middle schoolers. So I am really deep into parenting of middle schoolers right now. And that is its own challenge and fun altogether. So definitely that's kind of how I identify first. I work in higher education and I do adjunct teaching, but I'm also a family mediator. So I'm a business owner. So I have a few different kind of professional roads that I'm on right now. I don't know. Let's stick to that right now. I think that's where how I'm defining myself.
There's a bonus piece that you're also narrating some like audio books and things like
Oh
that
yeah.
as
Oh,
well,
I'm doing
dabbling
so many
there.
different things. Yeah, I just decided I wanted to be an audiobook narrator, so I did 4 narrations through
Yeah,
Audible and I got paid for them. So that was really cool. It was just
exactly.
one of those things where you like are curious about it and then you Google it and you just start doing it. So, yeah.
Yeah, you're just doing all the things. You're starting your own. Like when I met you, I never would have guessed these are the things you would be doing. You didn't even have
Mhm.
kids then.
I know. I was a very different person then. Even though I was the same person. I feel the same
Yeah,
since I was like 12, you know.
yeah.
But yeah, it's been interesting cuz I don't always feel like I'm driving the ship of where things are going. Sometimes I feel like I'm along for the ride and I'm seeing where things take me, which is uncomfortable. Like I want to be driving for sure.
Yeah, I think we all end up realizing that we're not really driving. It's just
Yeah,
kind of,
exactly. Like life still just kind of happens to you and throw things at you, and then you kind of let it take you where you may. I mean, I will say when I was 19, I got a tattoo, and it was the whole theme of it was go with the flow. It was like a clock, like a symbol of a clock with waves going around, and it was like to remind myself to just go with the flow. So, sometimes I think my 19-year-old self had a good idea there.
yeah. Were you more go with the flow back then? Or were you trying to convince yourself to be more go with the flow?
I probably was more go with the flow back then. I think I've tightened the reins a little bit as I've gotten older, but it's a good reminder to try to be that way.
You never know what you're going to get to experience if you kind of let things also happen. So this journey was just all happenstance. So I mean, it's just been really great, and so I love seeing that you're dabbling in all these different areas now, and you're like, so what? If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But I tried it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's really freeing. It's like scary, but it also is freeing and fun. And I hadn't tried a new career in a long time. I mean, I was with the same kind of umbrella company for 17 years. So going into family mediation has been a totally new thing for me. And I think it came out of left field for a lot of people like, oh, what made you decide to do that? So I think a lot of that is kind of central to the
To
story
your
that I
story.
was.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think if these moments didn't occur in your life, you probably wouldn't be doing what you're doing now because,
No, I
the
don't think so
things
at
that
all.
happen to us or around us or the things that we make happen lead us down these different paths that we never could have imagined. So I think that's a perfect segue. Nice work, Jackie,
Thank you.
to bring us to the segue. I'll let you kind of paint the picture and go back as far as you need to
Okay.
of kind of your life leading up to this pivotal moment that we're going to be centering today's conversation around.
Okay. So, probably around the time when we met, we were in our mid to late 20s, right?
Yeah,
And
late.
late 20s. Okay. Well, so I'll say, in my late 20s, I was married. I was just starting to have kids. I had my first kid at 30 and my second at 31. That was my whole center of my life was my marriage and growing my family. And I had married somebody who I went to kindergarten with. And so it was somebody that felt like family from the very beginning. And we didn't actually date until we were 25. So it's not like, oh, yeah, we were together since, the beginning, but we knew each other. We were in a lot of the same activities and the same circles. So we just knew each other's presence. Like we have school pictures together from elementary school. And I played softball with his sister. So we were teammates. So I knew his parents from being at all the ball fields growing up. And it was just like an easy transition to become family with
Hmm.
this person.
It was like comfort.
Yeah, totally comfort. And it was sort of like, it just felt like we had this great story. And I think I was like really invested in the story of I met somebody from kindergarten and then I went away because I moved away. I went to school out of state. I moved to California. I moved to New York. And then somehow I ended up at 27 marrying somebody that I went to kindergarten with.
Right. It is a good story.
It was a cool story. It really was. And I mean, I remember he proposed to me on our playground of like where we grew up. So it was just like very sweet
Right.
and idyllic.
Yeah. And you can harp back to like those moments of childhood and think, remember when we did this? And there's a lot of these memories of growing up too, where
Yeah,
even if they weren't in the same exact circles all the time, you could relate to the neighborhood, to the this, that, and the
exactly.
other. Yeah.
Literally, we grew up in the same
I
neighborhood.
can't I can't relate to I don't know anyone from that long in my life. Not a
Yeah,
person.
yeah, it's pretty wild. I mean, it is just to have that kind of level of history with somebody. We literally have a picture standing next to each other in one of our class pictures in elementary school. So it's just kind of a wild thing. And it felt really good finding somebody like that. And I sort of felt like it was the first person who wanted to marry me. And it was sort of a romantic thing.
I talk to people about this for myself personally. So much of my life in my 20s and maybe probably in my 30s was very much a checklist kind of thing. Like I have to do this next. Like you have
Hmm.
to get married, you have to have kids, you have to have a good job, get promoted, all these things. Did you have any of that drive? Like,
Totally. Totally. It felt like it was prescribed, right? I didn't even question it. Like it was so ingrained into me that I didn't even think of anything else. And I remember I used to journal in high school, college years, And I wrote down my 10-year plan when
I
I
did not do
was
that.
in college. And I followed it like almost exactly. But unfortunately, it was only 10 years. So
You didn't know what to do after that.
yeah, exactly. But I was like saying, oh, at this time, this is when I'm going to get married. And at 30, I'm going to have my first kid. And this is what, and I did it. So it felt like it was just all on track. So I would say that was kind of the feeling I had. Not to say that my marriage was perfect. That's certainly,
Nobody's is.
yeah, that was definitely not the case. But it felt like it was the right path. And I never imagined not being married to him.
And at the same time, I think it felt like, from what I could see, you were also very career driven, a very like, you had purpose there as well. Like, I know you had this family life and that was a big goal of yours. But I think from the outside seeing you, you were very driven in the workplace as well to be successful, to get promoted, to all these things that we were trained to do as kids. So that played a big part in that period of time too, right?
Yeah, and I think we were both right there, literally side by side, kind of getting promoted and growing within the company and all of that. So yeah, it was pretty great. Like I always say, like, when the corporate ladder is good to you, it's good. Like when you keep getting promoted and you get more responsibility and more credibility or clout or whatever it is, it can be very rewarding until it stops rewarding you. I don't know. I definitely felt that drop off.
Yeah, I think my chase was very much, I feel like I was trying to find something that would feel good, or I would feel good enough or successful enough or whatever it might be. And it was like every time I would get promoted, I would be like, not yet. Like, it's not here yet. So I was trying to like run away from something or find something. I don't know what it was. I don't know if that's any of the drive that you had, or if it was just like, I just want to be successful or run away from home.
I think it felt pretty good at the
Okay.
time because I don't think I was trying to like rise up the ranks. I felt that I was being recognized for things I was doing. I just kind of went with the opportunities that came and it felt like I was being rewarded. So
And
it
you were.
felt good.
You were. I don't ask that with any preconceived notions. I just think of myself of like, when I look back in that time period of my life, there was not one of those moments that the happiness of the promotion or whatever it was that I was in at the moment, none of those moments lasted very long until I was like, well, that didn't fill the bucket. So, and moving forward. So, always curious if other people feel the same way.
Well, and you kind of bring up like how did it connect with my personal life? It was my stability.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
My career was my stable place. And so, whatever was happening in my personal life, I could go to work and it would be predictable. And so, I think I felt
Safety.
comfort in that for sure. And I think that's why I also never really looked for another job or did anything because it was sort of like, okay, I can at least go to the office for the day. This was back in the day when we were in the office every day. And it was just like I knew what to expect when I was there. It wasn't chaos. And so, it's like problems come up and you're always dealing with things, but it's like you kind of know what you're walking into for the most part. So, and at the time, I had a boss who also was super understanding and flexible with me and gave me a lot of autonomy and trusted me. So it was a safe place to go when my home life was
Was
wild.
starting to, yeah, because you were married and then
Yeah.
pregnancies back to back. So not only are you have a child, but now you're pregnant again, which another child is coming. So you have those responsibilities. I know being a mom is a full-time job on top of a full-time job. So I can imagine that just as one person, that would be a lot. But then bringing in a marriage piece to that probably added a little
Yeah,
challenge,
for
should we say?
sure. Well, yeah, so I got promoted to head the department while I was on my second maternity leave. I actually learned that I got that promotion and then the first day back from my second maternity leave, that was when I started the new position.
I don't think I knew that.
Yeah, it was wild cuz I was at work on both of my due dates. So it was all happening. So yeah, I had at home I had a newborn and a 1-year old and I was in a new role as like a department head. It was not an easy time.
Yeah. Plus you're married, which is in an ideal world a partnership. Was it still a partnership at that point, or were things kind of
It was. I think when the kids were really little, he was really involved. He had his own business at the time. And so he was the more flexible parent. I was the one at the office every day. So he really was in charge of the kids day to day. And he would kind of do jobs here and there. And his mom would help watch the kids when he needed to go do a job. So yeah, it was a partnership at that point when they were little. And he always wanted to be a dad. In fact, I kind of always felt like he was ready before me. It was like as soon as we bought a house, he was like, all right, let's start having kids. Like we got the room now. There's no excuses. So he just always wanted to be a dad. I think I was always maybe a step behind him, but I was on board.
Right, of
But
course.
he was sort of like, yep, now's good. Let's go for it. I definitely did not think my kids were going to be so close together. I did not plan it that way. It just sort of happened. So yeah, it was those first couple years are a blur because I was working really hard, coming home to an increasingly chaotic home life, which I know I keep alluding to because there wasn't like, I didn't really know what was happening at the time. I feel like I kind of lost grip on what was happening at home and I was in survival.
It's probably your subconscious protecting you a little bit,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. And my kids didn't really sleep that great when they were little. So it was like I was completely sleep deprived and I nursed both kids for a year each. And it was just kind of like physically draining in every way.
Which then becomes normal, right? Then it just starts to become normal. So even little things that change don't feel so drastic, I think.
Right, right. Well, where I feel like I started kind of losing what was going on at home was I realized that we didn't ever have any money. And
Mm.
I was like, I keep getting promoted, I keep getting more money, but we never seem to have it. It just keeps disappearing. And I just feel like I couldn't pay attention to it enough to know where it was going, but I knew it just was always so tight. And so that was another stress level too. It was sort of like we just never had enough money, like to the point where I was afraid that a bill was going to bounce our bank account. It was like really tight month to month, paycheck to paycheck.
And logically, it didn't make any sense in your head because you're like, he has a business. I'm successful at work. Like, I'm smart.
I know. I was like, I have a business degree. Like, I run budgets. I should know how to do this. But it was like I didn't have the mental capacity to keep
I
track
get
of
it.
it. And it just kind of got away from me.
I think what you said earlier is like that safe space was work. And so you could control everything at work. Like you could make the decisions, you could, all those things. And so it kind of fulfills that need. And at home, you're
Hmm.
just like, just melting into whatever's like I fall into the wall because, I control everything there and I just can't do it everywhere. You're only one
Yeah.
person, but you're probably not the only person that has lost track of that or felt like, because looking back, you now see that you lost track. But in the
Hmm.
moment, you probably were just like, I'm so tired. Everything's chaotic. I can only do this. This is it.
Right. I mean, I felt the stress, but I didn't really know the source or, you know what I mean? I couldn't like
Yeah.
connect all the dots.
Were you someone that would talk to people about these things? Or was it more pride or things like that you wouldn't share?
I don't think I did. It felt so private. And my husband at the time was very protective of not sharing what was happening inside the marriage and inside the home. And I wanted to respect that. So I don't think I told people. I don't think hardly anybody really knew what was going on.
I mean, I think that's normal. I think that's very generational of like, we keep everything inside, we don't share. But also, like, if you have nowhere to put that, you just push it down and you just do what you can. You
Yeah.
control the things you can, and the other things
Hmm.
you're like, I'll deal with them later.
Exactly.
I think it's normal.
And part of the chaos too, the kids at this point, like going into when they were maybe 2 and 4, they were in preschool at that point. And some of the chaos that I mentioned would be like the preschool director would call me at work sometimes and be like, oh, nobody picked up your kids today. And I would have to go drive over there and go get them. Or it was just like exactly what you said. I could hold it together at work, but things outside of work, I just felt like I couldn't control it. I could tell that my husband was spinning out, like things weren't happening. Kids aren't getting picked up. Money's disappearing. Like I knew something was happening, but I didn't exactly know what it was. And I did not grow up with any addiction in my life. Like my parents didn't have any addiction. It just wasn't part of my upbringing, thankfully. And so I didn't even recognize that it was addiction that was kind of the common thread that was connected to all of this.
I hate to keep going back to our age, but it's like really like growing up, we didn't, even if our families had these things, we probably wouldn't have known too much because people didn't talk about it. It wasn't like it is now where people are very open about the things in their lives. I talk about some of the addictions and the things that I had, like eating disorders and those kind of things that come along with it. But like growing up, we weren't allowed to talk about that. Like the only time we would see something that was addiction related would be like Jerry Springer,
Right.
Maury Povich, like, and it would be to the extreme, right? It
Super
would be like,
dramatized. Yeah.
exactly. You would be like, oh, well, I would definitely recognize that because
Right.
that's what it looks like. But
Right. Right. Like holding a bottle all day, drinking, and you know what I mean? Like,
right.
and it, to me, it wasn't obvious. I really didn't know that it was happening for a long time.
How did it start to unfold though? Because eventually you did.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I feel like the moment that I chose to share is sort of the moment that it all clicked. So this was in 2015, so 10 years ago. Again, my kids were 2 and 4 at the time. I got home from work one day. It was like a Wednesday, I think. And nobody was home. And it was so rare that I had a moment to myself at the house that I was kind of like, "Oh, quiet." It was wonderful. So I was not upset about it. So I just remember having like an hour or two to myself, and it started to feel weird. And I was like, something's off. I wonder where they are, what they're doing. And I figured they were over at their grandma's house because a lot of times they would stay over there for a meal or something like that. And I call over there because I was calling my husband at the time. I was calling him. There was no answer. I called grandma. She hadn't heard from them or seen them. And it got to be about 8 o'clock and it's getting dark outside. It's a school night. The kids have preschool the next day. And I was just like, where are they? This is weird. And I started to get that like weird feeling that something is not right. At that time, we didn't have like Find My iPhone. Like I couldn't just like look and see. And I was like, how do I find out where they are? And I think we had like a T-Mobile account and he had a Google phone or something. And I like, remember I got on the phone with customer service at T-Mobile and I was like, how do I track this phone? And I was just trying to find any way to do it. And they actually showed me there was a way through his Google account to track it. So I was able to see that his phone was in St. Augustine, which is about 2.5 hours away from us. And I was like, that's weird. And it was like, you could even see it was right off the highway. Like, and in my brain, I was like, they're in a ditch on the
Mm.
side of the road. Like,
Because you
it's
still
been
don't
an
know where your kids
accident.
are.
No sign of the kids. And I just was imagining all these horrific things of what it could be. But the fact that he wasn't picking up his phone and the phone wasn't moving, it was there, it was stopped. It just seemed like it was an accident. And so, like, my heart drops. I'm like, I don't even know what to do at this point. I ended up calling the police and I just explained the situation. I'm like, is there any way I could have police go over and try to see what's going on or where they are? And so, like, the local police connected with the St. Augustine police. And, anyways, they ended up finding them and they were at a gas station right off the highway. The police called me and said, we found your kids. We found your husband. They're okay, but he doesn't know where he is and he's very disoriented. You need to come pick him up. He's not in any trouble. They were like, he's not under the influence. He's not in any trouble, but we'll stay here with them and bring some diapers because one of your kids needs a new diaper. And so I want to say this is like getting close to 10 o'clock by this point where we've actually found where they were. And so my dad came over, picked me up, and we drove out to St. Augustine. So it's probably close to midnight by the time we get out there. And sure enough, they're just hanging out at a gas station, and the police were there waiting with them. And they talked to me and they said, you need to take him to the hospital or take him to the doctor first thing in the morning. And I said, okay. And he was just really in a daze. He was very out of it. The kids were okay, but it was just all out of sorts, you know? I get them, my dad drives home. I get in my husband's car and we all drive home. And on the drive home, we pass by this campground, like on I-95, there's like these campgrounds along the way. And I remember him saying, let's pull off, let's stay at the campground tonight. And it was just like, it was all very bizarre. And I was like, no, we're going home. I'm like, I got to work tomorrow. The kids have school. Like, we're not going to a campground. And it was like he didn't know where he was or where he was going. He didn't know why he was in St. Augustine. He was
That's so
telling the
scary.
police these different stories about going to a baseball game and going to Nana's house, which Nana doesn't live anywhere near there. It was just like these little fragments. And I just was so confused, but I was like, let's just get home. Thank God everybody's okay. We get home. The next morning, I take him straight to the doctor. I took him to the family doctor first. I don't think he slept all night because he was like almost kind of comatose in the morning, zombie-like. And I took him to the doctor, and the doctor kind of took one look at him and said, take him to the ER. And so I took him to the ER, and we ended up getting checked in. And I'm still like, what is going on? What is happening here? And the nurse told me this is classic alcohol withdrawal.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, what? And I found out that alcohol withdrawal is one of the most serious types of withdrawals that you can go through, like more so than most drugs. And they say it's the one withdrawal that can kill you. And I knew he was a problem drinker. I'll say that. That's about as much as I would acknowledge, is that he would drink too much some nights and kind of pass out.
But something we normally sometimes would brush off.
Yeah, exactly. I just kind of was like, he parties a little too hard on the weekends sometimes with his friends. But he always would say, oh, I could stop drinking anytime. And he would go cold turkey sometimes and just not drink for a month. So it was sort of like he always felt like he was in control of it. So I trusted that too. And so that's exactly what happened. He decided to stop drinking that week. And somehow that time was different. And he fell into a really bad alcohol withdrawal. So he ended up in the hospital. He spent a night or two there. And he was having like a lot of delusions. It was a lot of paranoia. Like he thought the nurses were going to kill him. And what was crazy is that he would act normal when a doctor would come into the room. And like he could talk in this performative way that made it seem like he was fine. And then the doctor would leave and he would tell me, he's trying to kill me. I can tell that medicine he's bringing me, he's trying to kill me. And I was like, what's going on here? I mean, it lasted for a while. So that's the night that I thought of when I'm thinking about like kind of what changes your life in a moment. I always look back to that night because it really never was the same after that.
It's like the curtain was pulled back a little. You got to see
full view
of everything. And I think of you and knowing the work side of you and the fixer side of you and the problem solver side of you. This probably felt very out of control for you personally, because knowing you, I'm thinking you probably are like, how do I fix this? Like,
of course,
how do I solve this? Like, even in your picking him up and all these parts of the story,
yeah.
I know other people that probably would have said a lot of choice words and acted a lot differently than the way that you tell your story. So I know part of you was like, what do I do? How do I fix this?
Oh, 100%. That's my reaction. And I would say for the next 3 years, I tried to fix it. That was the main goal. I was like, besides work, that was the main goal of my life, was let me try to fix this scenario that has gone out of control. And I became kind of his manager of his addiction, which, now having distance from it, it's not shocking that didn't work, because it's like when somebody is an addict, you can't fix it for them. They have to want to fix it for themselves. But it was like everything was on the line. It was my marriage. It was my family. It was my kids. And I'm
Your
like,
storybook.
Exactly. And I'm like, I am going to do everything I possibly can to fix this. So it kind of started this chain reaction of lots of rehab. So he did end up in and out of rehab over the course of about 3 years. Luckily, our insurance was decent enough to cover a lot of it, but it still was expensive. He did some inpatient, some outpatient. He was Baker acted, I think, a total of 4 times, which in Florida is the involuntary psychological hold. So sometimes he would be picked up by police. Like he was wandering around somebody's backyard one day and police picked him up and Baker acted him. Like those were the things that would just happen randomly. It was like, the way I describe it is like a wire came loose and it just like never reconnected after then.
But how, for someone like if we take it to you, how hard is that when you, because I'm sure that you have a lot of love for him and you loved him at the time and you probably still love him
I
in a
do.
lot of ways.
Yeah.
How does that love change for you in a way that like you're seeing that this is going to be very surface level sounding,
Yeah.
but like, oh, he's not changing for me. He's not, did you have any of those feelings of like, why won't you just do this for us? Or were you logical enough to realize that it's not quite possible?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
It's hard to remember. I don't think I was holding it against him.
That's good. That's very big of you.
I think I felt that if he followed my lead, I could help him fix it.
Like all you have to do, there's the program steps.
Exactly.
Follow
because,
through.
Exactly. And you called me a fixer, and I totally am. Like I'm a problem solver, and I will read the books and I will do the research and I will follow the steps. So I'm just kind of like, come along, follow these steps. Like there's a way to get out of this.
Did you feel like you were pushing him, or did he feel like he wanted to do it as well?
Oh no, I pushed the whole time.
Okay. Yeah. And to that point, it's really, I can equate it to just like someone that's like in a deep depression or you're in that feeling, like nobody can really fix it for you or push you into until you're ready to be like, okay, I'm ready to approach this or whatever.
Yeah.
I'm ready to come on the Life Shift podcast and talk about it. You know, I think you and I are so very similar in a lot of ways of wanting to control certain things and knowing that we can in a lot of our lives. There's a lot of avenues in our lives where that has been successful for us.
Yep. You and I were both managers together.
Yeah.
We know how to manage and problem solve. Like that's what we're good at.
Exactly. And life in other ways went in the ways that we wanted it to because we put in the work and we made things happen. But then you have this like entity that you're not fully in control of. And it makes it really challenging as a human. And so I guess the question really goes to, does that unsuccessful, if we quote unquote unsuccessful period, does that do anything to you and your psyche and the way that you operate in the world?
I mean, it was definitely crushing because when I always felt like when I got married, when I said those vows, I meant them. I was totally committed to being married. And I never imagined myself being divorced. And so admitting that I couldn't keep living that way and admitting that I couldn't fix him, it was a personal failure. That's what it felt like. Divorce feels like failure for sure. But I also had this other layer of it where I was like, he's sick.
Mm-hmm.
And how do you
That
leave a
makes it
sick
harder.
person? Yeah. I was like, if he had cancer, I wouldn't be leaving him. He has this other sickness. How can I leave him?
That's really hard.
Yeah. So that I think was the hardest part about just trying to figure out what do I do when clearly I'm not fixing it. It's not working.
And all the while, I feel like your professional life was like buttoned up. Do you think that was a save for you? Do you think that was still your comfort safe space, or did that make it doubly hard?
No, I think it helped. I think I'm really good at compartmentalizing. Like I've always been one of those people that I put the blinders on and I don't notice other things that are happening around me.
I don't think you're like that as much anymore.
It used to be, I remember when we would sit in those cubicles, if I was working on a project, somebody could be saying my name and I don't even hear them because I'm just so focused on something. So it was like I could go to work and just focus on other things. And it would actually relieve some of that home stress to just have tasks to do at work that I could fix.
Right? Does that become a second job in trying to save this idyllic vision that you had for your life and for your kids' lives and for your husband's life and all of your entire family? Because this isn't just about you and your ex-husband. This is about your parents, his parents, like everyone is involved in this, because not in the exact thing, but whatever happens next doesn't just affect you. right? And you can't control really what's happening next.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I started to question things like, why, like, this is the father I chose for my kids. And now they're growing up in chaos. I remember coming home from work. I ended up signing up my kids for karate. It was like one of those you pay by the month and you could just show up anytime. And so that was my backup plan. If I would come home and it was a really chaotic, bad scene at home, I'd be like, okay, kids, we're going to karate. And we would just get in the car and go. So it's like I had to have all these backup plans in place. Usually, home, like after work, that's kind of your safe place to relax and unwind and be yourself. That was the harder job that I
Yeah.
had to come home to.
How long was this period of time in which you gave it your all until you broke, essentially? Until you
It was 3 years.
took you 3 years to, and what, because I would imagine 3 years of doing something, it just becomes like, this is life now. How do you determine that now it's Jackie's time to make hard decisions, do things that serve me maybe more than serving others?
The sad thing is, I don't think I made the decision for myself. I made it for my kids. It was
Well,
like,
that's
this is
honorable.
not an environment that they deserve. I was like, I don't want them growing up in this chaos. And I remember reading a book. I'm always trying to do like a calculation that will like give me the right answer. And I remember buying this book. It was called like, Should I Stay or Should I Go? And it was like, I was trying to calculate, okay, when do I leave? When do I say enough's enough? And I remember like one thing that I took out of that book was, do you want your kids to see your marriage as an example of what a marriage should be? And I was like, ooh, that hit me right here. And I was like, this is not what I want for them. And so in my mind, at about the 2.5 year mark of going through all this, in my mind, I said, I'll go through one more cycle. I'll go through one more cycle of recovery and relapse and chaos. And it was leading up to our 10-year anniversary. And I remember thinking, like, we got this, we can make it to 10. But in the back of my mind, I was like, I'm not going to go through it again. And sure enough, the roller coaster went back
Right.
around, right back to where it kept going. And I was like, I ended up filing for divorce before the 10-year anniversary because I was like, I can't go into the next 10 years like this.
Yeah. You already know a couple cycles and what it looks like after the cycle. Do you regret that last cycle?
No, I think I had to do all of that to get myself to a place where I felt good doing it because I have never regretted filing for divorce. And I think I would have regretted it if I felt like I didn't like give it my all. And so I think I needed to set that
You
for
needed data.
myself. I
You
did.
needed you
I
needed
did.
data and metric. I mean, it makes sense. I mean, it's
Yeah.
just, you're like, okay, I'm feeling a certain way, but maybe I'm a little delusional, so I'm going to try it one more time
Mm-hmm.
to confirm. I don't mean to push regret on anyone. I'm just curious, like there are things that I've done. I'm like, oh, I shouldn't have done that again. But I love that you found that space because I think there's a lot of people that are probably in very similar situations. They want to fix, they want to save, they want to whatever, and they can't get yet to a point in which they realize that there isn't a save. Maybe the save is the hard decision.
Exactly. And I think I had nothing left in the tank. I had to hit that point where I was like, there's no other option now. I have to leave.
Do you feel like a different person though now, comparatively?
I feel a lot more knowledgeable.
Well, I don't mean logistically. I mean like
Yeah.
emotionally. Do you feel more secure in your decisions than you did before? Do you feel the same? I feel like something like that, if it were me, I feel like I would be like, dang, I did this.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I don't think about it, but yes, I'm going to say yes, I do feel that way because I was really scared of being a single mom. And I knew he was not in any shape to parent. So I sort of figured I was going to be doing it on my own at some point. And that was very scary. And I was not confident in myself being able to do that, which now when I look back, I'm like, it's so much easier doing it by myself than doing it in that circumstance that I was in before. And so I think, yeah, I think I do kind of believe in my self after going through that. Like I can do all of this.
I mean, even from the day I met you, I was like, she could do anything. Like she could conquer anything. And I think what makes sometimes people maybe like you feel that way is that growing up, you had this picture of a married life. So you always had a partner to help you there. And that maybe that's where some of the doubt comes from. Because I think as an individual, you've always knocked all the things you've tried to do out of the park with everything you could control. So I had no doubt that you were going to take care of your kids and everything would be fine. So,
Well,
but
thank you.
like you
It's
said, it
it's
taught you a
just
lot.
going into the unknown.
Yeah,
That's what it is. And my parents are still married happily to this day. I'm like, I'm not a divorced person. Like that's not, it's like an identity thing.
it is. And I think we put a lot of pressure on that. I mean, divorce is just another change in life. And,
Yeah.
people change too. You said you learned a lot through this, and obviously you're helping people through this with your business. But none of this would have been true now of what you're doing if you didn't hit some bump. Like, was it a struggle at first, or were you like, good, got this?
It was easier than I thought it was going to be.
Really?
The period of the divorce and everything leading up to it, hardest part of my life. Once it was all done and I had a new place to live and I just had kind of a new life to start, I felt amazing.
Because you could make all the decisions. Like
Yeah.
you didn't have to think. I mean, you had your kids, but you
Yeah,
could
but
make all the choices.
just making all the parenting decisions, making all the school and the financial decisions. I think I tend to hoard those things because I do like to have control. But man, it's so much easier now. And my house is calm. And I think that's the big thing too, is just like the house environment is what I always wanted it to be. Like this is a safe, calm home to come home to. There's not chaos here.
And now that your kids are teenagers, there's probably a lot more interaction and decision making and things that can come along with that. So now, like, you can help guide them in the ways that they want to go too.
Oh yeah, I'm not saying any of it's easy.
No.
but there's stability. It
Right.
feels stable.
And you feel solid in your decision making because it's your decision. You didn't
I
have to
do.
like convince someone of something or bend over backwards to make something else happen. So
Right.
I think that's great. What happened in that divorce journey, and maybe something didn't, but what happened in that journey to make you want to help other people through it?
So because I filed my own divorce and I kind of
I
got the
didn't know that.
ball, yeah, I did it all myself in the beginning.
Although that doesn't surprise me.
Well, I was a corporate paralegal after college,
Okay.
so I'm good with paperwork.
Okay.
I just decided to just do it. So I just did all the paperwork myself, went to the courthouse and just got the ball rolling. So I ended up kind of being the default friend that people would come to be like, how did you do that? And I helped several friends kind of get their stuff in order and help them file their own divorce. It kind of filed away in the back of my mind that I could help people do that. But again, I was on that corporate ladder that we talked about and I was being rewarded and I was still being rewarded. I mean, I got my last promotion 3.5 years ago. And it was sort of like I didn't really have space to just go become a mediator.
You could help people still, but in your own helpful way.
Sure, exactly, as a friend.
Right.
But then corporate ladder, it rewards you for a while, and then my position got cut. And so I guess that's sort of a little bit of the career portion shift where all of a sudden that upward trajectory at the company was over. That's when I decided to become a mediator because I finally had the time and space to do it. And I needed to figure out a way to make more money. And it was just one of those things. I actually had a friend. I helped her kind of unofficially mediate with her ex-husband when they were having some arguments over the holidays. And she's an attorney. And she actually told me, you should become a mediator. You're pretty good at this. And so I had looked up.
I've been in many meetings with you, so I think you're pretty good at it.
Well, thanks. And so I had looked up the requirements of how do you become a mediator? Because I went through mediation during my divorce. And I saw that, you kind of get credit for having a master's degree. You get points for certain things. And then you take a certification class, you have to do a certain number of mentorship hours, this and that. And so when my position got dissolved, I decided to do the class and get my certification. And that was just about a year ago that I did that and just decided to go for it. I launched my own business and I was like, I'm going to be a family mediator. And so I can help people get divorced, and my goal is to do it as peacefully as possible and to keep people out of court and to kind of help people through that kind of awful transition time, to let them know like it is better on the other side once you get through it. And the crazy thing that happened, I don't know if you know this, my very first clients that I had when I opened my business was this lovely couple who one of them was right out of rehab. They were trying to reestablish time sharing with the kids. But when somebody comes right out of rehab, they can't just go straight to 50-50 custody. It just is kind of a recipe for disaster to put a lot of responsibility on somebody who's in recovery very freshly. And so I ended up writing this parenting plan for this couple. It was like a 3-tiered parenting plan to say, okay, first step, we're just going to do some weekend visits. And it's like a warm up, right? And then second step, we're going to start doing every other weekend with overnights. And then third step, we're going to work our way up to 50-50. And I did this whole plan for them. And it was like, I knew exactly what they were going through. And the parent who was in recovery was sort of doing all the things that I had wished my ex-husband would have been able to do, which is actually stay on that path to recovery and like set yourself up for a plan for success and get time with your kids. And my ex-husband never did that. He was never able to pull himself out of it. And this couple, or this ex-couple, that's what they were trying to do. And so that was my very first mediation that I did on my own, was for somebody who was in a very similar situation.
It's like things aligned in a
It was
weird
kind of
way.
crazy. Yeah. It's
Yeah.
like, how does this happen? Like the universe sends me this as my first client.
And knowing you personally and knowing you through this last year of, obviously it's not easy to start a business and get your name out there and do all these things that come along with it. But when I do see you talking about it, or when we talk about these things, you have a different like lightness or happiness towards the work itself than I've
Mm-hmm.
ever experienced. Not to say that you didn't like your jobs before, but this feels like more like aligned to the things that drive you, but now with your own personal experience and kind of driving you more. So, I mean, it feels very aligned. And I say all that long piece to go back to when you said your job dissolved, because I look at that moment very similarly from the outside as to when the curtain was pulled back from your ex-husband and you kind of saw all the
Mm.
things. The dissolution of your job was like, oh, it served me. It served me well. But all the stuff I was putting into this, and these are assumptions here, but all the stuff that I'm putting into this, climbing this corporate ladder to get here, 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 giving back so much, and it can just go away like that. Curtain pulled.
Bingo. No, I think that that's a perfect metaphor. And I don't think I ever thought about it that way. But I think you hit the nail on the head. It's like, I think I always thought that my job was more than a job. I found purpose in it. I felt a lot of responsibility, a lot of personal investment in it. And I always kind of thought the company felt the same way about me.
They
And
probably did
that's,
at times.
well, I'm sure some people did, but that's sort of a wake up call to be like, oh, when it comes down to it, I'm still just a line item on a spreadsheet and I'm replaceable. You know, in our jobs, we're all replaceable. And that's a hard lesson to be hit in the face with. To just be like, literally one day I go to work and poof, my job is gone.
If we could take the money part out of it and just pretend we had all the money and we could do whatever we wanted, does any part of you see that as like kind of a little blessing in disguise of now you get to kind of adventure into other things and try other things because you kind of have to, but at the
Yeah.
same time, now you can lean into more joy in certain things?
Yeah, I think so for sure. I think after the initial shock of it wore off, because my initial reaction was total panic. But
And
after I
anger.
got, yeah, that too, bitterness, anger,
Yeah,
a lot of
we
bad
have it
things.
all. Yeah.
I think after that wore off, I was like, I'm going to be happy this happened, because I was not happy in the job, not at all. But it was sort of too good of a job to leave of my own volition. And I had so much invested into it. I don't think I would have left. And I don't think I had any fire under me to be looking for something. So there was part of me that was relieved also.
You didn't know you were going to be relieved at the end,
Yeah.
but yeah, I get it, because I think things can be so, not to say that the work is easy, but it can be comfortable, and you kind of,
Yes.
it's a known entity. You kind of know the world you're existing in, and you don't have to like start anew. So that's easy to stay. And it's a lot harder to jump out on your own and try to do all these things and make it happen. But in your example of your first client that you had in your business, it's like, I can't imagine how fulfilling and like how warm you must have felt, in the sense of like, I'm helping this sliding doors version of Jackie, of like,
Totally.
had things gone a little bit differently, someone would have been helping me do this. Maybe I can empathize with so much of that story, despite not having any of that story, because I think there's so much that you and I have in common, that through line feels very common, but like totally different. If that
Yeah.
makes any sense.
Well, and I'll tell you something that happened in the last month that you don't know. I went to a meeting of family therapists, because that was one group that I really wanted to get to know more family therapists, because I thought that could be a really good healthy pipeline. If somebody's going through marriage and family counseling but it's not working out, perhaps they can then come to a family mediator like me to help them with the next steps. And so I went to this group of family therapists, and man, it is like the nicest group of people you want to ever be in a room with. It was so warm and inviting. I was like, these are the people I want to be around. At the table where I was sitting for this event, I was introducing myself to people, and there were two people that worked at the rehab center
Oh, wow.
where my ex husband spent a lot of time. And I used to go to the family sessions there. And it sort of hit me when they introduced themselves and I found out that that's where they worked. I was like, oh, like I'm getting chills thinking about it right now. I'm like, oh, I know that place really well from a different side. I told them a little bit, just on the spot, I told them a little bit about this story, which I don't normally share this with people I know really well, much less strangers. And I told them this personal connection I had to this rehab center. In that moment, I said, I'd love to meet with you all sometime and see if there's a way I can help the families that are in recovery there. And I actually have a meeting with them next week. And I'm like, I think I could be a mediator helping people coming into recovery. I ended up having lunch with one of the therapists, and she said, there's nobody that does that. There's nobody that has that niche. I was like, I don't know, this kind of light bulb went off for like 2025. I'm like, I think this might be my niche. I'm not even looking for it, it's finding me.
You aren't driving.
I know. And so I'm going back to the rehab center next week to have this meeting and talk about how I can help them there. And they were even talking about how they want to start this alumni program of family members who have been through the program, and they can help talk to people who are there now going through the same thing. And I'm like, I think that might be the perfect place for me to be sharing some of this and talk to some of these people. So the universe is a weird place. Like, I'm not a religious person, but I do believe in like the universe kind of sending you places. And it feels like that's happening right now.
Yeah. And none of it, in my opinion, would be happening had you not experienced the things that you experienced.
Yeah.
You might have, in that sliding doors version, say your ex-husband didn't have the addiction, you would have kept going in your journey, maybe same career journey, dissolution of that job. Now, where does that Jackie go? And so it's like all these roads bringing you to, maybe, like you said, this purpose kind of feeling of like, maybe this is what I need to do. This is what I'm called to do. And I love that for you, despite the hardness of the entire journey. But I know in my own experience, losing my mom at an early age, like, I wouldn't be this, Matt. We wouldn't be having this conversation had that not happened. And so I have to look back at the things that happened because of it with a weird gratefulness of, how I've moved through life in that way.
Yeah.
So I like to kind of wrap up these conversations with the question, and I'm wondering if, like, 2025 Jackie, if knowing where you are, about to have that meeting in the rehab center, all these things, if you could go back to that Jackie that walked in the house and it was really eerily quiet and you were kind of enjoying it, but then really concerned, is there anything you want to tell her about the next part of her journey?
Oh, I would say buckle up. This is going to be a rough road, but you're going to make it out and you're going to be fine. And your kids are going to be fine. It'll work out. Because being in the middle of all that uncertainty, it's just like you don't know where you're going to end up or what's going to happen in the next day. So I think looking back on it now, I just want to give her a hug and be like, you're going to make it out of this.
Yeah. And to be fair, I think no matter the story that I hear on the Life Shift podcast, it's like everyone will tell that younger version that it's going to be okay,
Yeah.
which to me, sure, common, but it shows us the resilience that we have, like the things that we in the moment are like, I'm never going to survive this. Like, this is insurmountable.
Mm-hmm.
And then we get past it and we're like, okay, I did that, and I'm okay, or I'm
Mm-hmm.
better because of it, and all these
Mm-hmm.
things that come from it. So,
Mm-hmm.
I agree. I knew you would always be okay, but I didn't know all these things were happening when you were just kicking butt at work still at the same time. So good on you for that. But I'm super proud of you for sharing your story and opening yourself up to do the things that you're doing now, because I think you're making, dare I say, far bigger impact in the work that you're doing now as a mediator than some of the things you did in the past. That
Yeah.
sounds
Thank
really
you.
bad, but you know what I mean.
No, I really appreciate that. It feels really personal and it feels really purpose driven. Like I had a mediation this morning and I feel a high out of it. Like when I finish and I help settle things for people and relatively keep the peace and help people do that, it just feels really good. It feels like such a tangible accomplishment. And I think the day-to-day work, you don't always feel that. It doesn't feel so personally connected. It's just kind of you're doing your job and you're doing your tasks. So this just feels really personal.
Yeah, I love it. It has the piece of heart, but it also allows you to still be a problem solver, a fixer, things that you're really good at, tactical things that you put into the world. So if
Yeah.
people want to, like, learn about your business, or I think it's right just in Florida for now, what you can do, but people want to hear about it.
So if you're in the state of Florida, I can help you in any part of the state. I do all my mediations on Zoom, so I'm totally virtual. And I am on social media at Jackie O Mediator. And I do post a lot of informational videos about mediation and about the process. And I share little tidbits about what I've learned, but also just how to get people in the right mindset to have a healthy divorce, if that exists, just
It
helping
can exist.
people
It should.
divorce better.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like it doesn't have to destroy you. It can be a peaceful process and you can stay out of court and you can stay out of chaos. So my business is Quarter Tone Mediation. The website is qtmediation.com, but all my social media is at Jackie O Mediator. And then you can always link out from there. And anybody's welcome to reach out to me through social media or on my website. And I do free consultations. So I'm always happy to chat with people. The wild thing is, these 15-minute free consultations I do, man, I get people's life story in 15 minutes.
Yeah.
You know?
Not here on the Life Shift. We like to stretch it out. No, I think we'll share all the links so people can access you pretty easily in the show notes. And I encourage others that are listening, and I don't know if Jackie wants this, but I encourage you, if something that Jackie said resonates with something you're going through, I'm sure she'd love to hear it secretly, because, it's nice when we're going through really hard moments to know that we're not the only ones going through it, and that other people feel very similarly, or they got through it okay. Your story is an example of getting through and thriving in different ways. So I encourage people to reach out to you, and hopefully that's okay with you.
Yep. I love it. Thanks, Matt.
Thank you, my friend, for being my first friend on the podcast since way back when at the beginning. It's been really a pleasure to listen to your story, ask you the questions that maybe would be weird when we're sitting at Chili's having a burger or whatever we have at Chili's. So thank you for being a part of this.
Yeah. Thanks, Matt. I appreciate you.
If you are listening and something that Jackie said resonates with you, or you think someone in your life might need to hear Jackie's story, please share this episode with them. Ratings and reviews on Apple Podcasts would be great. Spotify, I don't know. All those things are really fun. But I'm going to say goodbye now because I don't know what else to say. And I will be back next week with a brand new episode of the Life Shift podcast. Thanks again, Jackie.